So I'm going to review just a little bit. I'm not going to go all the way back to Nanak's upbringing, interesting though it is. I'll start with Nanak. He's the founder of the Sikh religion, or Sikh. And he was a contemporary of Martin Luther. All right, so this is a new, relatively new religion. And they met the challenge in the Punjab and pulled it off. And so, let's see, I'm going the wrong way. Here we go. Remember, he teamed up with a Muslim musician sidekick, and they walked around the Punjab, the two of them together. And then they were joined by a Hindu peasant for a triumvirate that was well represented. He was born Hindu, but his initial thrust opposed the thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe 1 million gods in Hinduism. In that sense, he leaned in the Abrahamic direction. But on women's rights, he was a Hindu reformer. And when it came to the caste system, he was against it. He thought that was an abomination. And so in terms of women, as in particularly widows, he said they should be allowed to remarry, and maybe we should stop burning them on their husband's funeral pyre. Now, I want to just review this a little bit. It was interesting. Ramsey apparently got wind of this, and we had a nice little conversation about the Dharmic religions versus the Abrahamic and Mediterranean philosophies. And you'll remember that the Dharma refers to some sort of destiny, a law, a duty, and that the East thinks in cycles, which is realistic in a way. They say, hey, we're always going to have these kind of problems. We've just got to learn to deal with them. We're doomed to repeat the human circles of life and all our follies. And that might even extend to the universe. How do we know that this cosmic Big Bang was the last one? And so on the other hand, in the Mediterranean and Middle East, you had the Abrahamic and the Greek philosophers together, and there was a more linear concept of progress, even a second coming, and that we put a lot of faith in the advancing with the technological miracles even. And so in terms of a dichotomy, is the Abrahamic Mediterranean basin a utopian compared to the East? And we had talked about the axial age many times, and that's when all these philosophies emerged. At the same time, you had Greek philosophers, you had the Jews in Babylonian captivity writing down the Bible, and at that same time, you had a Buddhist who was going to reform Hinduism. And in China, at the very same time, Confucius, all within a matter of 150 years. It was quite remarkable. So I went into my files and I found this slide from Ramsey that talks about the Chinese concept of the dynastic cycles, that they're used to that. And when one dynasty gets corrupted, they lose the mandate of heaven, and Confucianism supercharged that notion. And what generally happens is a new dynasty comes in, they redistribute the land, They lower the taxes on peasants. There's often some invention, particularly in agriculture. But then the bureaucrats inevitably become selfish and corrupt. Ramsey has said the average amount of time it takes to do that is 6 generations. Then I just want to blow this up a little bit and kind of flesh it out. Let's start. A new dynasty claims the mandate of heaven, usually a warlord, right? This is not a peaceful process at all. And there can be centuries of fighting before a new dynasty gets established. And when they do physical and human infrastructure, but then 6 generations and they start raising taxes. There's corruption and this meritocracy. Remember the Confucian exam system is the first world meritocracy where you had to prove your worth, and every village would invest in the smartest kid and in the hopes that he'd become a bureaucrat. But with time, the bureaucrats favor their own children, which may be where we are in this society now. One of the critiques of American progressive liberalisms is that our meritocracy is self-perpetuating, that to make it into an Ivy League college, you need rich parents, et cetera, et cetera. So we may not be immune to this kind of cycle, but then quite often there's some sort of disaster. How about a pandemic? And then a new dynasty claims the mandate of heaven, and off you go again. Obviously, in the Hindu concept of reincarnation is cyclical. And there with Buddhism, there's an idea that maybe you can jump off this perpetual cycle by going to nirvana or whatever this Buddhist equivalent is. This is a more complicated vision of the Hinduism cycle. And then the Buddhist wheel of life, same idea. Nirvana is the off-ramp. As a corollary to this, you have the idea of the hero. Who is the hero? And the contrast between the Mediterranean concept of a hero, granted it was pagan, but it was taken up by Athens and the Greek philosophers. This was the culture. That there is an individual hero who makes a difference, versus the great tale of the Mahabharata. The stories are strikingly similar. A woman gets kidnapped. In Greece, it's Helen of Troy. In the Mahabharata, it's Rama's wife. And there's fighting, there's a big battle. And a corollary of Achilles, the equivalent is Arjuna, who has a conversation with Krishna. And what's the same is you have two tribes fighting for regional dominance, long period of war. Initially, they're both reluctant to fight, but Achilles overcomes it when his very good friend Patroclus gets killed, and he wins the victory. And the difference is here. Achilles is kind of has a big ego, and and he's mad. That's what gets him to overcome his reluctance to fight, his anger, his emotion. And he overcomes that and leads to the glories of an accomplishment and the spoils of war in this life. Arjuna is quite different, as told in the Bhagavad Gita or the Bhagavad Gita. And he listens to what Krishna is whispering in his ear, and he finally accepts his dharma, his fate, and he understands that it's all useless. And there's going to be, he's probably going to win, but the victory is going to have no meaning, no importance, because it's just one part in a recurring cycle. He shoots his arrow and it finds its mark, but he is not exuberantly basking in glory at all. And that's the story of the Bhagavad Gita. And then just an extension, Ramsey liked this book, and the idea of the individual, like Achilles. It's a huge leap from Achilles to Jesus. But when you look at just the idea of individualism, as the Greeks conceived it, Christianity continues that idea. We know that the Bible was influenced by Greek philosophers, and to some extent, the thesis of this book that he found intriguing, that the West is devoted to the individual as nowhere else in the world is, like Achilles. So I just found this, one of his slides going through it. This is interesting for the absence of Hinduism. There's a golden rule in Confucianism, Aristotle expressed it, Buddhism, Christianity. There ain't anything like that in Hinduism because of the caste system. It was just striking to me what an outlier Hinduism is in global theology.
What about Islam?
Yeah, Islam has the Old Testament. Now, the golden rule is in somewhere in it, but I'm not able to come up with the details on that. I think Christianity is certainly more golden rule-ish than the Old Testament is. There's no doubt about that. There's an awful lot of smiting your enemies in the Old Testament, and nobody advocates smiting your enemies in the New Testament. So a good question. We'll have to research that. Thank you for that question. So now we're back to the Sikhs and this new religion in around 1500. And this is what the first guru, Nanak, the founder, said: there is no Hindu, there is no Muslim. They were caught in the middle. The Punjab was caught in the middle between the Hindus in the south and the Mughals, who are, you remember, are Altaic, a combination of a Mongolian and Turkic. And so I'm starting a table here because it gets kind of confusing. There are 10 gurus. I'm going to whittle that down to 5, but each is interesting in terms of the evolution of the Sikh religion. from a totally peaceful theology to a developing a warrior class. Now, why would they develop a warrior class? That's what we're going to answer.
Can I
So,
ask you a question?
yes.
So before Nanak, in the Punjab, were they Hindus or were they just some?
They were mostly Hindu. Nanak was born a Hindu, if you'll remember.
Yeah.
And the ruling class, however, was Muslim, and that tension and that resentment is playing out today in India.
The ruling class was Muslim. You mean like what is it? That family that the guy who built the Taj Mahal belongs to.
Yes, the Mughals.
Okay, so the Mughals.
They were Mughals, and we're going to see Mughals that we've known and talked about in parallel with the numbered gurus. That's why history is so fascinating. You get one timeline, and then you go back and you make the connections to a new timeline. And so I'm connecting Nanak to Babur. The Punjab was ruled by the Mughals, that family, started by Babur, who you remember had a Mongolian mother and a Turkic father, descended from Tamerlane. All right, so how did they meet? Babur met Nanak, who had been imprisoned for his goofy ideas. And he said, well, wait a minute, this isn't so bad, release that guy. And so that was the beginning. And we're going to talk about a span of around 400 years. And we're going to see how Sikhism evolves from a purely religious movement to a temporal power with an empire that is going to last to 1849. So put onto your seatbelts. I'm going to go through this pretty quick. So you had the growth period, and the initial thrust was to reform Hinduism, right? Particularly the caste system and the treatment of women. And the Muslims go along with it at first. This is a good step, a baby step in our direction. But over time, there's this incompatibility between the Dharmic religion, which Hinduism is, and the Abrahamic religion, as I reviewed yet again today, because it's so important. So the Muslims realized, hey, we can't get along with this cycle. We're on our way to heaven, where we'll all be one day at the day of judgment. And so they start oppressing the Sikhs. We're going to get rid of it. And the Sikhs take it for over 200 years, but finally they say in 1699, enough. We've had enough of this. We have to form a warrior wing, and this is the Khalsa, and this is the 10th guru. And so he dies in 1708. But before he goes, he said, listen, my successor, whatever he writes isn't necessarily going to be sacred. I've had the last word in adding to our sacred scripture. And so their holy phase, sacred phase, ends in 1709, and the militant wing takes over, and the warrior class is quite successful, eventually forming an empire that peaks in the 1830s. And that peak is lost to, guess who? The Brits. The Brits come in. They lose to the Brits, but then they say, you know what? We respect you. You're warrior class too. You beat us. So we're going to be your administrators of Hindu India. And so they cooperated with the infidels because in the Sikh religion, Christianity is not an infidel. The Muslim religion, they are, but they weren't strict Muslims. So they work with the British, and then the British leave in 1947, and India gets split, right, between today's India and Pakistan. And the Sikhs have to decide, and they go with the Hindus. And we'll talk about how that happened a little bit, because that split now is set a boundary between two nuclear powers. And if we want to look at the risk of nuclear warfare, one of the hotspots is the Punjab, and straddling the split in the Punjabs are Sikhs, who all live in the India half of the Punjab. And they maintain a prominent supportive position of the Hindu administration all the way until 1984, in our lifetime. And something really bad happens in 1984, which we'll get to. But let's go now to the second guru. He's the one that invented the script. Remember Pir Roshan, the Pashtun thinker who modified the Pashto language? Well, the second guru did the kind of the same, and used it to broadcast Nanak's words, and gave the Sikhs a distinct identity. His other idea was, listen, we're primarily spiritual, but there is also a physical aspect of this. Physical fitness as part of education. And it was he who centered the religion in Amritsar. More about that in a second. Now, remember Akbar? This is one of those interesting connections. Akbar is the grandson of Babur. And if you'll remember the slide of Akbar, he was like Amenhotep in Egypt. He had this idea of reforming Islam and to create a more syncretic religion, a little bit like Baha'ism today. Maybe we've all encountered someone who believes in Baha'i. Very admirable blending together of many different religions. We could argue the Unitarians are a little bit like that. And so Akbar cooperated with the third guru actively in the campaign to liberate Hindu women. The Sikhs differed a little bit, and they leaned more to monogamy, but not absolutely. Not absolutely. I find this contradiction in the literature on monogamy. And then we're going to skip a few gurus in the interest of boiling it down to the forest and not getting lost in the trees. The fifth guru built the Golden Temple, which is going to be a very important emblem of Sikhism. And this Mughal emperor, Jahangir, this is the dates he reigned as the Mughal, he developed a real antipathy towards the fifth guru and had him tortured to death. He said, convert back to convert to Islam, and not back. You started as a Hindu. You went halfway with this new religion. Now go all the way and convert to Islam. And the fifth guru said, no deal, and he was tortured to death. A big turning point. But before he was tortured to death, he built the golden temple in Amritsar. Beautiful, and also has been the scene of political protests. This temple has been destroyed a few times, as we'll find out. The sixth guru, real quick, he said, okay, you've tortured my predecessor. Now it's time to start an army. No more Mr. Nice Guy, but we're going to at least start a tradition of carrying two swords. Now, if you remember 9/11, after 9/11, American Sikhs were attacked because they wore turbans. And then they had problems at airports because their religion, they carry a couple of swords or knives, symbolizing their spiritual and warrior defense. And so that's been a real problem. And it was started, this tradition of carrying knives was started by the sixth guru. And then the ninth guru, he's another martyr. Aurangzeb, and we all remember Aurangzeb from our previous discussions on the evolution of the Mughal dynasty. Aurangzeb asked the ninth guru to convert to Islam, and when he refused to, he said, okay, I want you to sacrifice yourself, which was a euphemism for we're going to kill you. And this was the big turning point. The torture of the fifth guru was one thing, but this guy was executed in front of the Red Fort, and his son is the 10th guru, and he's the one that's going to end the sacred phase of the gurus, and he will militarize his followers even more than the sixth guru did. And so this is the ninth guru in front of the Red Fort, about to be decapitated. This is the table. No new information here. I just summarized what I just said to boil it down to its real essence. The progression from Nanak to Gobind Singh, and how each of the Mughal rulers interacted and forced the evolution or influenced the evolution of the Sikhs. And then these are the details. Nothing new here. This is more for me than for you, so I can keep all this stuff straight in my mind. So the 10th guru, he goes for maintaining full power in the Punjab to start a real nation. And who resisted him? The hill tribes. Aiko and I visited some hill tribes when we went to Gujarat, and I can imagine these hill tribes were similar to the hill tribes that we met in Gujarat, but they resisted this idea of a nationalism, of a secular state being taken over. They wanted to continue to be part of the Hindu system. It was bad enough that they had to tolerate the Mughals, but this was going too far to have fellow Punjabis try to lord it over them with a new religion. So that was the first fight he had to make, was in the Punjab. And then he started a very militant organization called the Khalsa. And as part of, you can look at this as their declaration of independence. You know, we're going to control the Punjab, and we're going to be independent of the Mughals completely. And so this is where he was born. This is Patna again. Remember, we talked about Patna before. It had been controlled by a Pashtun for a few decades, and it developed almost a Pashtun empire. So there's something about the fluidity of Patna. But this was where the 10th guru was born. And you can see the gurus did pretty well. I think they tithe, and obviously some of the tithes went to supporting their guru, just like Catholics support the Vatican. So this is the Khalsa. Interesting story. The 10th guru says, I'm going to pick at random 5 Sikhs, the pure ones. We'll go around the countryside and sample from each region of the Punjab. And we're going to bring these 5 worthy Sikhs to the castle, and I'm going to baptize them. I'm going to baptize the pure ones, and we're going to put together a warrior code. And my third wife is, by the way, the mother of Khalsa, this new warrior code, and she is equal. We don't have gender. I'm including her as part of the process. You don't see women included in the Muslim clergy, and you don't see women in the Hindu Brahmin class. We keep running into the word sing. And it was interesting to me because I've known people at work named Singh, both co-workers and patients, and it means lion. And this habit of calling people Singhs, calling them lions, starts with the Khalsa and with the 10th guru. So this is the place where the Khalsa was born. It's a holy place in the Sikh part of the Punjab. And now we're going to jump forward 130 years, and I'll give you the spoiler alert. This is the last of the Sikh rulers. 130 years later, and this is Maharaja Ranjit. This is a mural, and he's meeting with the current Khalsa. You can think of it as a cabinet. And the 5 Ks of Khalsa, since we have so many Sikhs in the Bay Area, I think it's interesting to at least look at what a pure Sikh buys into if he wants to be considered a Khalsa warrior. Uncut hair, a wooden comb, a steel bracelet, a sword or a dagger, and you're supposed to wear short breeches, maybe underneath a business suit, but there should be breeches under there. And that's similar kind of to the Mormons, right? They have a certain kind of undergarment. And this are the material things that a Sikh Khalsa warrior class has to have, and which gives him problems in the airport. And part of their code, and kind of thinking a little bit more about this, I made a connection to the samurai. This isn't all that dissimilar from the samurai, but specifically no tobacco, halal meat. And I never knew what halal meat was. I'd heard of eating halal from the Abrahamic religions, but it's just a way of slaughtering an animal so it bleeds to death before you actually, it dies by bleeding to death, which I guess is supposed to be more humane. And then sexual continence is a part of it as well. And then, so the 10th Guru, Gobind Singh, he finally goes to Aurangabad. His father has been executed, and now the Mughals are imposing taxes on non-Muslims, right? So on Hindus and now Sikhs. There was a period where they were exempt in the good old days, when there was cooperation between the Sikhs and the Mughals, where they didn't have to pay increased taxes. And by the way, this is true in some Muslim countries. They'll allow non-believers as infidels as long as they're willing to pay more taxes. And that was an early tenet of the Muslim empires. But Guru Gobind Singh is a man on a mission. He's already mad about what happened to his father, and he says, no deal. This is a deal breaker. And he eventually leads 14 wars against the Mughals. And he ultimately is assassinated in 1708. He doesn't die on the battlefield. And thus is the end of the gurus. He's the last guru. But a few years later, there's a reaction to the assassination, and a new leader emerges, and the Mughals execute him. So that yet another Sikh martyr, the 6th guru, the 9th guru, and now this guy. So during the 1700s, there's just confusion, fighting, warlordism, double crossing, and it's not just the Sikhs, it's and the Mughals, it's also the Pashtuns. So you'll remember when the Durranis first took the throne in Kandahar, remember there was a Mughal cleric who felt threatened by the Hindus coming up from the south. And the Mughal power was starting to weaken, and so the clergy, the Muslim clergy, looked north to the Durrani Pashtuns. So come down and help us. And you remember they did, and part of that Mughal clergy, they also looked to the Arabs, and you remember that there was contact between the Mughal clergy and the Saudis, the Wahhab, the original. Remember those connections? So now that call to come down and help fellow Muslims between the Mughals and the Pashtuns is honored. in the past, the Pashtuns and Mughals have been enemies, as we've studied in detail. But now here's a part of history where they're working together against the Maharathas, Hindus that are coming up from the south. So this is kind of a great game going on even before we get the Europeans, right? I'm going to call this the original great game, and the European great game, the second great game. But there's two episodes. I'm just going to take this whole century, 1700s, and boil it down to two episodes so you don't go crazy with the detail and the violence. The one from the Sikh point of view is called the Great Rescue in 1761. And Abdali, who is the Pashtun emperor for the Durrani Empire, he was fulfilling part of his commitment to go down and help his co-religionists, the Mughals in India, fight off the Hindus. And in the process of helping them do that, this Pashtun leader, apparently, according to the literature, takes a lot of Hindu women. It's hard to believe it's that many, as booty. And he's going to sell them into slavery, but on the way back to Afghanistan, the soldiers are going to have their way. And the Hindus go and Tom Ritsar and, hey, Sikhs, help us. The Pashtuns are really bad guys, and they're abusing our women. And so the Sikhs respond, and they defeat Abdali's forces. Abdali returns home, but he comes back to propagate the Great Massacre, what the Sikhs describe as the Great Massacre. And Abdali says, I'm going to finish these Sikhs off forever. And so he finds that they're camped in a forest, and women and children and old people. And this is according to the Sikh history, right? And who knows if this is true, but as I've said many times, Sikhs believe this is true. And that's important, and it's going to motivate them, as we will see. And so so many people were murdered, up to 30,000. And it took 50 chariots to carry all the heads of the victims to Lahore, where was the seat of the Mughal power in the Punjab. And so that was the Great Massacre. So the Sikhs respond, and they go down to Delhi and capture the Red Fort 15 years later. And so the Sikhs have done a really good job in training their warrior class into being quite capable fighters. And so that the transformation is complete within a very short period of time. They are gone from the victims of the Mughals to now defeating the Mughals. And they have their warrior class, their samurais, if you will, that enable them to do this. And so this is, to my way of thinking, a kind of great game way before the European great game. So let's go back now to the Pashtuns and talk a little bit about how they're interacting. You'll remember this map from before. They've expanded a little bit to the west, but the Persian plateau is kind of dry, and there's not much there for them. Still, it's the river valleys that produce a lot of wealth. So they extend down towards the Ganges. And this takes them right into Sikh territory. So here's Amritsar, and the Durranis politically controlled all this territory for a while. It's always interesting to me why the Pashtuns never went north, particularly. And I think, or west, there was the Hottek Empire, which briefly expanded over this way, but there's not much to hold them, and there wasn't much to hold them up here. There's river valleys here. So there's the Indus River, which was one of the four great rivers that helped advance human civilization. And this is 1,500 years before Christ. The other river plain is the Ganges. The Ganges, and that's what sparked this wealth of these two river valleys. Is what led so many people to come roaring down through the Khyber Pass, that corridor, attracted by wealth. Not many go in the opposite direction. We talked a little bit about the Aral Sea, and there are some small rivers going into that, but nothing like the Indus Valley or the Ganges. And so that's the answer to my question, why Pashtuns never went north. So I just want to review all the people that were drawn through to the south, through the Khyber corridor. Remember, it was an Aryan invasion of India in 1500. They brought with them the Veda religion, which evolved into Hinduism. So that was the first move south. The Arabs with Islam made it through starting around 700 and eventually evolving into the Delhi Sultanate. We've talked about the Mughals. Now, from the south are the Marathas, which are going to force or encourage the Pashtuns to come down for religious reasons as well as for wealth. We've seen a couple of examples of how Patna was an attraction on the Ganges. You'll remember there was a Pashtun ruler of Patna after Babur died, and the Brits, they come down. Now the Pashtuns, which is the star of our story, they came down in the 1500s in an organized way. I'm sure Pashtuns had been mercenaries for a long time, but they came down in an organized way from the Lodi area and took over the Delhi Sultanate and then Patna. And now the Durranis are down, and the big thing is the religion. That's what is the ideology Remember when I have this little model in my mind, and once the violence is settled by a warlord, the first thing they do is turn to religion, and then if a successful religion, then they can move on upward to trade. But it was the river valleys and the religions that supported that are pretty obvious. I'm going to mention Alexander. He was attracted to his goal was the Indus, and there's a famous story of when he got there, he met a Jain, and so I'm just going to mention Jainism. It's not on my list of religions, nor have I said much about Zoroastrianism. Ramsey and I had a little exchange, and he said, well, he wasn't sure. So you can bet the two of us are going to settle that. But Zoroastrianism isn't there. But I don't know. Does this represent? Alexander was tutored by Aristotle. I'm going to at least give Greek philosophers an honorable mention here as being a religious cover for people who headed south through the Khyber corridor to first the Indus and then on to the Ganges. Very important religion later on is going to be Greek Orthodox as manifested by the Russians, who are definitely going to be part of the great game. I put it in parentheses because we're not quite there, but I just want you to bear that in mind. That's going to be one of the elements. So this is the Sikh Empire as of the 1805, after Maharaja Ranjit has been in power for 5 years, and all of a sudden now you've got an autonomous zone. No Mughal administrators are welcomed here. This is the Sikh nation. And this is going to be a pretty good place to stop. So I'm going to stop here, and we'll talk about the Sikh empire. That's a building already. It's going to be a little bit bigger than this, but this is what it had already achieved in 1805. The Brits are here looking north, and I'll just say again, the Brits are nervous about the Russians, right? The Russians are coming down, and they've had, you'll remember from our talk about Russia and the steppes, they've controlled the steppes, boosted by the confidence that they were given by their victory over Napoleon. They come back home and they say, hey, if we can defeat Napoleon, we can defeat all these Turkic people that are north, all the stands, like Uzbekistan. They're raiding Southern Europe and taking white slaves. And we've quite had enough of this. So they come south, and they manage by the 1880s to control all the stands. They stop at Afghanistan, but part of our story with the Pashtuns is they're going to start up again in 1979, not because of communist aggression. I'm sure there's some of that. But this is part of what they see as their destiny, their history. To head south, there's you conquer Afghanistan, and pretty soon you have a port. You head south, you've got all the riches that the Brits are getting in India, and we want some of that. So that's great game number 2, and the Sikhs are going to be very much a part of that. They're a part of the end of great game number 1, but they're going to be right in the middle of great game number 2. So that's it. I'm going to stop and take questions.
Do the Sikhs still control that area in the present day?
Oh, that's a very good question. And that's part of the next section. So I'm going to answer that. But I do an awful lot of spoiling, right? I like to let you guys know where we're headed. But I'm gonna hold on that, and I'm gonna say tune in next week. All that will be revealed in detail.
Oh, great. Thank you. And I have one other question. What's the weight of the hair on, if you never cut your hair, how much weight do you put on your head for a lifetime?
Well, it stops growing at a certain point. It gets down to a little bit above the waist. Maybe it's longer in women than men, but it reaches a certain length, and the hair is on a it's around a 12-month to a 18-month cycle, if I recall correctly. So a hair follicle, a hair in a particular follicle has a life expectancy, and it falls out. That's why when you finish your shower, you've got some hair. And those are hairs that have had a natural life and died. But the hair follicle doesn't die. The hair follicle says, okay, we lost that last hair. It was time for it to move on, and we'll produce another hair.
Thank you.
That was interesting. This is Irene. I have a question about Ladakh and Nepal. So just because I'm interested in the Himalaya, and I was interested that in the 1805 map, Nepal is there and showing it's as a separate entity, presumably because it's too mountainous or something for the others to invade, because it's, yeah, I mean, so the question is, Ladakh, the Hindu Kush, are they in, they're currently an independent country, if I remember correctly, but they didn't appear on the map, Ladakh, there, but Nepal did. I'm just curious about those.
When you say Madras?
No, Ladakh, oh, and
Ladakh
is the Hindu Kush. It's an
okay.
extension of the Himalaya.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have friends who were recently there in that direction. So the Nepal is Hindu,
Yep.
and I think you gave the answer. It's isolated. It's a little bit like Afghanistan. Why hasn't anybody conquered Afghanistan? Well, we know no Europeans have, but we know Kabul has changed hands many times, and Babur being a major example of how the Turkic Altaic powers were able to at least control the major cities. But in terms of conquering the whole country and administering it and collecting taxes throughout the realm, that's a hard thing to do in a mountainous country that has many valleys separated by passes, and passes can be easily defended, as American troops have experiences, just like Russian troops before them and British troops before them. So I imagine Nepal is the same kind of thing. Like the Sikhs, though, the Nepalese cooperated with the British. So you have a warrior class from Nepal called the Gurkhas that go with the British around the world and help them administer things, just the way the Pashtun the Sikhs did with the Hindus after 1947 until everything fell apart in 1984.
Right, right. Thank you.
They're kind of like the Switzerland of the Asia, you know, that Switzerland didn't get invaded because they were so mountainous.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, the Swiss warrior class, if you go to the Vatican now, and who are the police in the Vatican? The Swiss Guard.
Right. Yeah.
I looked up Nanak because I was curious, you know, what class he might have been in Hinduism, because the thing is, you know, Sikhism and Islam appealed a lot to the people who were lower caste because they could never get up there, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, he didn't come from the lower class. He didn't come from the upper. He was a trading class family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting point. Yeah. Yeah. The biography of these people is fascinating. You know, why did they do certain things? Why did Martin Luther do what he did? His dad wanted him to become a lawyer.
And he did. He argued his case.
He did indeed. Okay, folks, until next week when we'll answer Shigeko's question.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
See you all next week. My power will be back on then. Bye.
Bye-bye.